Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am here with Marianne Williamson, my dear friend. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Well, everybody, depending on your politics, you are either very depressed about the demolition of American democracy, or you bought into the authoritarian scam that, no, gutting our federal agencies is all about waste, fraud, and abuse.
I think this is my radar, Marianne.
It is
we
your
can
radar.
save this for your memo.
Give everybody a context for the show.
Okay.
And of course, right, on to you. What's on your radar today?
Well, the Democratic Party activists are furious with their party leadership, particularly Chuck Schumer, who recently canceled his book tour over security concerns, i.e., he doesn't want to tour the country and be heckled by his own voters. Yes, it's dark days for the Democratic Party under its current leadership. In fact, things are much, much worse than many people know. Progressive political strategist and data expert David Shor was interviewed by the New York Times as Recline yesterday and took a close look at some of the data from the 2024 election. Now, we've been over a lot of this stuff before. Everybody knows that Trump significantly improved his standing among minority voters, for example. But what maybe you didn't know, however, was just how significant those gains really were. I was astonished reading over these charts. They're going to blow your socks off. Here are a couple salient points from the Shor-Klein interview. First, minority voters. Trump didn't just do better with minorities, he did better with immigrants, all kinds of immigrants, Hispanic immigrants, Asian immigrants, even Haitian immigrants. Remember the mainstream media furor over Trump and J.D. Vance's comments about Haitian migrants? Well, Haitian migrants in Florida actually trended toward Trump. Looks like they weren't offended by the things him and Vance had said, or else they just didn't care. Shor writes that overall, quote, our best guess is that immigrants went from being a Biden plus 27 group in 2020 to a group that Trump narrowly won in 2024. The media, the Democratic Party, anti-Trump Republicans, their case against Trump largely rested on his anti-immigrant rhetoric, his anti-immigrant agenda. I don't know what to say. Despite all that effort, or maybe because of it, immigrants have moved toward the Republican Party. The more immigrants who voted, the more the Democratic Party's share of the vote is diluted. Amazing. And then there's the youth vote, which is even worse news for Democrats, if you can believe that. Young male voters have moved so decisively toward the Republican Party that Democrats could seriously be locked out of power forever as they become a larger share of the electorate. Steve Bannon seems to agree. Here's what he told Chris Cuomo last night.
I'm a firm believer that President Trump will run and win again in 2028. So I've already endorsed President Trump. A man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
Trump won 18-year-old non-white males. He won them. Young male minority voters chose Trump over Kamala Harris. Shor and Klein find that particularly baffling because for years, Trump was reliably least popular among young people. He's a figure of cable news, reality TV, which is how older voters consume media, so naturally he was more popular with them. Not anymore. Trump's best demographic is Gen Z. That's probably because he's become a figure of new media, of podcasts, of YouTube, of X, of TikTok, where Trump is utterly destroying the Democrats. He also saved TikTok, which probably helped with the people who prefer to get their news from that forum. Now, of course, on the flip side, the most reliable Democratic voters are old, highly educated voters. Among this cohort, gender and race aren't as salient. Democrats do a little bit better with women and with minorities in the elder age category. But the main thing is age and also education. Talk about the party of elites. Dems would do better if it was just affluent whites voting. Younger, less wealthy, minorities, immigrants, particularly young men. That's the GOP's trump card, for lack of a better term. I know which hand I'd rather be having. Democrats clearly need new leadership. Leadership that understands how to talk to immigrants, how to talk to young people, and in particular, how to talk to men. Whatever they are doing is not working. It's alienating to all but an increasingly aged white electorate. The Democratic Party is perceived as hostile to the interests of everybody else. So these are phenomenon we've been commenting on for a while, but David Shor really laid it out in very, very stark terms. It is starker than I realized. Can you imagine the Republican presidential candidate? We're used to Republicans getting I don't know, 8% of the African-American vote or something. Trump won 18-year-olds, first-time voters who are minorities, who are men.
Well,
Won them.
Your analysis of what's happening is correct. It's kind of undeniable because those are facts. But as someone who was there in the belly of the beast, I can tell you that it happened because the Democratic establishment elite felt so entitled to decide that it should be Biden, and their efforts, quite vicious efforts at times, to de-amplify and peripheralize anyone other than their chosen candidate is what created this craziness. I can assure you that my agenda, and possibly the agenda of others who would have run at least, was such that I don't believe that this would have been the outcome at all. And so for those of us who believe in the primary principles of the Democratic Party, you know what happens here is that the Democratic establishment elite looks at people such as myself as kind of trying to hijack the party, but actually they hijack the party. Many of us want the party to be the party of FDR, want to be the party of unequivocal advocacy for the working people of the United States, which would mean universal health care, which would mean greater economic opportunity, which would mean tuition-free, near tuition-free college and tech school. For all Americans. If we were giving to the American people, providing the kind of agenda that would truly better the lives of people and be public policy in service of allowing people to thrive, then I do not believe that this would have been the outcome. So for now, you're correct, and the Democratic Party, the Democratic voters, have a big choice to make. One of the things that has been very disappointing to me is that when I was growing up, you thought of the Democratic Party as the party of the free thinkers. And now I sometimes will watch how MAGA will hold accountable the people it puts in office in a way that the traditional Democratic voter has not been willing to do over the last few years. And that's what needs to happen. Democrats have got to stop buying into, well, if the DNC said it, it must be true. If Schumer said it, it must be true.
Or if mainstream media said it, it must be true.
Well, the mainstream media, there's a lot of mainstream media. There's Fox's mainstream media, and CNN is mainstream media. I think that the role of citizenship is to think for ourselves, and Democratic voters, when we think for ourselves, the thing is, when I was running, Robby, I saw how corrupt the system is, but I also saw how wonderful people are. I saw how smart and decent the American people are, and I know it didn't have to turn out this way, and it makes me very sad.
I want to again just emphasize, though, the agenda is one thing. We can debate what the agenda should be. Obviously, I don't agree with the agenda of progressives to a large extent, although maybe there are some areas
health care.
No. There are some areas of commonality.
No, the market, because the market's handling it so well.
Well, we don't really have a free market in healthcare, but I don't want to get into that right now. The mode of communication, though, I think is so important. And I think that shows, again, I said this during the radar, but just to emphasize again, Trump's transformation from a person who was much better liked by older Americans who are used to older Americans watch TV at much higher rates, right? They're still plugged in. They knew Trump from The Apprentice, from appearances on Fox News, from his cable. He was a figure of cable, and thus was more appealing to the kinds of Americans who are more likely to listen to talk radio or watch TV. But he has reinvented and transformed it. I mean, he's obviously still a figure of those mediums, but he has excelled in the podcasting format and on social media in a way that has made him a new media figure and thus appealing also to young people. And I think that is an important piece of the explanation for why he's now doing best with younger Americans. I mean, that's a remarkable transformation. He was least popular with young people 8 years ago. He is now most popular with young people. And that's for speaking to them in the ways, hanging out with them on the platforms in which they use to communicate and get information. That is, in my view, the Democratic establishment elite leaderships, whatever you want to call it, their main failing right now is they are still too reliant on the New York Times op-ed page and TV in general. They're speaking to older, people who get their morning coffee and browse the New Yorker. That is their voters, and that's not enough people.
Well, you are absolutely correct. I said to a U.S. Senator years ago, what is it with the Democratic Party? You have to audition to be part of it. Yeah. Sometimes I have felt over the last few years like the Democratic Party was intentionally trying to shrink its base. And we will look back on the 2024 election and see Kamala Harris's refusal to go on Joe Rogan as a mistake beyond even comprehension. And also, even when she said she'd go on, he had to come to her for 30 minutes. When anybody who knows anything about American pop culture knows that set, where he is for those 3 hours, is the essence of the Joe Rogan experience. So unfortunately, it makes me, heartbroken the ways I have to agree with you on some of these issues. But your analysis on why we lost, I disagree with you, as you said, on agenda, but in terms of the things you've been talking about, particularly new media. But it's interesting because that whole new media thing it goes along with this idea of this delusional politics somewhere in 1995. And that's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Yeah.
And I know from my own experience, and they'll call anybody else fringe when they are increasingly fringe. But once again, it can change. It can change. Schumer needs to resign. Hakeem Jeffries needs to resign. Let some new voices in there. And it's the 11th hour, but it's not midnight yet. We're going to come back. And I don't know what part the Democratic Party itself plays, but those of us who want to stand for democracy and see Donald Trump as a threat to that, we will be back and we will save this country. I absolutely believe it.
Next up, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin had a call yesterday. We will discuss. Stay tuned.